Hi, this is Les and Amy from the RevGenetics podcast. You can listen to the podcast on YouTube and now on Spotify, where we do a deep dive on supplements and longevity studies.
Today we are exploring a really wild discovery called the gut-bone axis.
Yeah, it turns out the tiny microscopic bugs in your stomach are secretly acting as the architects of your skeleton.
I know, it sounds totally made up, but it's a very real thing. We're looking at a major shift in how we understand human biology.
Right, because if we understand how these bugs dictate our bone strength, it could completely change how we stay active as we get older.
Absolutely.
So I want to start with a paradox that I think confuses a lot of people.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, you hear about someone who does everything right. They drink their milk, they take calcium, they go for walks. But then as they age, their bones still get super fragile.
Right, yeah.
If they have all the right building materials, why is their skeleton still failing? And, how on earth does their stomach have anything to do with it?
That is the perfect question to kick this off. To solve that, we kind of have to change how we picture our bones.
Okay.
Most people picture their skeleton as a static, solid rock. You know, like the wooden frame of a house.
Right. Once it's built, it just sits there.
Exactly. But that is not how your body works at all. Instead of a finished house, think of your bones as a house that is constantly undergoing renovations.
Oh, wow. So like an active construction site.
24 hours a day, every single day of your life.
That sounds exhausting for the body.
It is. And inside your bones, you have two different teams of workers. First, there's a demolition crew.
Okay, the wrecking ball guys.
Yeah, their whole job is to break down old, worn-out pieces of bone and clear them away.
Right.
And right behind them, you have a building crew. They bring in fresh materials and lay down brand new, strong bone.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The demolition crew clears the plot, and the builders pour the new foundation.
You got it. So as long as those two crews work at the exact same speed, the house stays perfectly strong.
But I'm guessing they don't always work at the same speed.
No, they don't. As we get older, things get out of balance. The demolition crew gets, well, a little too enthusiastic.
Uh-oh.
They start knocking down the walls much faster than the builders can put up new ones.
And when you have a demolition crew working faster than the builders, you get missing walls.
Exactly.
Your bones get thinner and lighter. So that's what osteoporosis is.
Yes, exactly. It's literally just bone loss because the daily renovation process got totally out of whack.
Okay, but for decades, scientists just thought this was a bone problem, right?
Right, they thought, the bones are weak, let's fix the bones. But here's where it gets crazy. The workers in your bones are actually taking their daily orders from your belly.
Wait, how does my stomach talk to my skeleton? They aren't even touching.
Well, to understand that, we have to talk about the microbiome, which is just the trillions of tiny bugs living in your belly.
The billy bugs, got it.
Yeah. Under normal conditions, your stomach and intestines are coated by a thick mucus shield. It keeps all the food and harsh liquids safely inside the stomach where they belong.
I picture that like a heavy winter coat in a snowstorm.
That's a great analogy.
As long as you have the coat on, the bad weather can't reach your skin.
Right. But as we age, that protective mucus coat starts to get thinner.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it develops tiny holes. And when that happens, bad, irritating stuff slips through those holes and leaks into your bloodstream.
And the bloodstream goes everywhere.
Exactly. So when that irritating stuff gets into the blood, it sets off loud alarm bells all over your body.
Like a panic mode.
Yeah, it causes a low level of full body swelling. Scientists call it inflammaging.
Inflammaging, like inflammation and aging combined.
You got it. It's a slow, swelling alarm system. Now, think back to our demolition crew in the bones.
Right, the guys knocking down the walls.
They hear those alarm bells ringing from the bloodstream, and it makes them go absolutely crazy.
Oh, wow.
The swelling acts like a giant megaphone yelling at them to work faster and more aggressively.
Okay, that makes total sense, but it's also kind of terrifying. If the winter coat is thinning and the alarm bells are making the demolition crew destroy the house,
Right.
how do we stop them? How do we turn off the megaphone?
Well, this is where the friendly bugs in your belly come to the rescue.
The hero bugs.
Exactly. And they have a favorite food, which is fiber. Things like vegetables, beans, and whole grains.
Okay.
When you eat those foods, you're throwing a massive feast for the good bugs.
And what do they do when they eat all that fiber?
They digest it and poop out these tiny health-boosting molecules.
Nice.
You can think of these little molecules as biological soundproof walls.
That's a proof wall.
Yeah. They travel through the body and build a thick, soundproof wall right around the demolition crew.
Oh, I see.
The alarm bells are still ringing, but the noise is completely muffled.
So they can't hear the megaphone anymore.
Exactly. The demolition crew calms down, they take a break, and that gives the building crew the quiet time they need to rebuild the bone.
So just by feeding the bugs a bowl of oatmeal, you're actively turning off the alarms.
Yes, you're sending a peace treaty to your bones.
That's incredible.
And that's not all. These tiny molecules also slightly lower the acid level in your belly.
Wait, why does lowering the acid matter for bones?
Well, think about trying to dissolve sugar in freezing cold iced tea.
It just sits in a lump at the bottom.
Right. But if you put it in hot tea, it dissolves perfectly.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Lowering the stomach acid acts like that hot tea. It creates the perfect environment to dissolve the calcium from the milk you drink.
So the body can actually absorb it and send it to the building crew.
You got it.
Wow. So for you listening right now, the takeaway is huge. Every bite of food you eat is a choice.
It really is.
You are either starving the good bugs and letting the demolition crew run wild, or you are feeding the good bugs and keeping the construction workers strong.
It completely changes how you look at your dinner plate. You're feeding your skeletal defense team.
You know, maintaining that kind of internal cellular balance is exactly why RevGenetics supports our mission to explore the latest in human health and longevity.
Yeah, they have a really long-term dedication to evidence-based natural compounds for aging research, providing supplements that target cellular health directly.
It is so fascinating how science-backed natural interventions can support healthy aging from the inside out.
It really is.
Okay, so let's shift gears and get into the hard science here. We just talked about demolition crews and soundproof walls.
Right, a simple version.
But neurologically and cellularly, we're talking about manipulating the gut microbiome to downregulate systemic inflammation, right?
Exactly. We are looking at how specific microbial communities modulate immune responses,
Okay.
and that prevents the overactivation of osteoclasts. Those are the cells that resorb or break down bone tissue.
The demolition true.
Right. And the builders are osteoblasts.
And what about those tiny referee molecules?
Those are short-chain fatty acids, primarily butyrate and valeric acid.
Okay, so now that we've elevated the vocabulary, let's talk solutions. We know the gut barrier degrades. We know inflammation triggers the osteoclasts. What does the clinical research say we can actually do about it?
The research points very strongly to specific bacterial strains, things you might see on high-end supplement labels,
Like what?
like Lactobacillus rhamnosus, LGG, and Bifidobacterium longum.
Wait, I always thought taking a probiotic with those strains was strictly for digestive issues.
Most people do.
You know, like you take it to settle your stomach after antibiotics. But this science shows they're basically bone builders.
Yes, they are fundamentally osteoprotective. When you introduce these specific probiotics, they don't just sit there.
They go to work?
Yeah, they aggressively ferment dietary fibers. They rapidly multiply and create massive concentrations of butyrate.
The soundproof wall.
Exactly. The butyrate binds to immune cells and forces the system to call off the inflammatory attack.
I do want to push back on something from our notes, though.
Ugh.
There was a claim that these probiotics might actually activate vitamin D directly inside the body.
Ah, yes.
But hold on. I always learned that vitamin D is inert when you consume it. It requires the liver and the kidneys to convert it into its active form.
You're totally right about the classical pathway.
So how is a microscopic gut bug doing the job of major human organs?
It's one of the most cutting-edge discoveries here. Researchers are finding that certain gut microbiota have specific enzymatic capabilities.
Meaning they can process it themselves.
Yes, they synthesize or activate vitamin D metabolites locally, directly inside the gastrointestinal tract.
Wow, so they completely bypass the kidneys and activate it right there in the gut lining.
Exactly. And because it's activated right at the site of absorption, it massively enhances the intestinal wall's ability to absorb calcium.
That is a hyper-efficient system.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't even know that existed a decade ago.
Not at all. It's fascinating.
Okay, let me make sure I had the intervention strategy straight. Taking a targeted probiotic is kind of like planting the most robust seeds in a garden.
I like that.
But seeds can't grow on their own. They need resources. So prebiotics, the complex fibers, those are the water and sunlight that help our bone health garden grow.
Perfectly stated. And the clinical trials have highlighted some amazing ways to get that fuel.
Like what kind of diets?
Well, we see tremendous benefits from polyphenol-rich diets, like the Mediterranean diet,
That makes sense.
and fermented dairy, like high-quality kefir or yogurt. But there's one specific clinical intervention in the literature that is absolutely wild.
You're talking about the prune study.
Yes.
I read that part of the paper, and I actually laughed. Dried plums. It sounds like an old wives' tale.
It really does sound folksy, but the data is incredibly rigorous.
Tell me about this study.
They looked at randomized clinical trials involving postmenopausal women,
Okay, so a high-risk group.
the highest risk,
Hmm.
because the drop in estrogen dramatically accelerates the osteoclasts. The demolition crew goes into overdrive.
Right, so what do they have them do?
In these trials, the women were instructed to eat roughly 50 to 100 grams of prunes every single day.
Which is, what, like a handful? Maybe 5 to 10 prunes.
Exactly.
And for how long?
They tracked them over 6 to 12 months, and the results were just staggering.
Really?
The women who ate the daily prunes completely preserved their bone mineral density.
Oh, what?
Yes, specifically in highly vulnerable areas like the hip and the lower spine.
Just from eating dried plums. What is the cellular mechanism happening there?
Prunes are exceptionally high in specific phenolic compounds and complex fibers.
The water and sunlight for the garden.
Exactly. The bifidobacterium strains absolutely thrive on them. By feeding the microbiome this exact fiber every day, the gut produced a steady stream of short-chain fatty acids.
Which built the soundproof wall.
Right. It systematically downregulated the inflammatory markers, slammed the brakes on the osteoclasts, and literally halted the bone loss.
Okay, I love those results. But as always on this deep dive, I have to play the skeptic.
Bring it on.
What's the catch? I know there are human trials like the prune study, but a lot of the deeper mechanistic data on this gut-bone axis is still relying on murine models, right? Mice.
Yeah, that is the necessary limitation we have to talk about. The lab results are mind-blowing. They can literally reverse severe osteoporosis in a mouse. But to achieve those dramatic reversals, scientists are giving them massive, super physiological doses. Pure butyrate and specific bacterial strains injected directly into the animals.
Right, doses that would be virtually impossible for a human to get just by eating yogurt and a handful of prunes.
Precisely. In the animal models, we're flooding the system.
And in humans.
We're still relying on our own internal bacteria to manufacture the molecules. The current frontier is figuring out the perfect therapeutic dosage for us.
Like exactly how many colony-forming units of lactobacillus we need.
Right, combined with exactly how many grams of targeted prebiotic fiber to mimic those massive regenerative effects.
So we haven't perfectly nailed down the prescription yet, but still, think about what this means for the listener right now.
It's incredibly empowering.
Yeah. If you're worried about your skeletal health span, about staying upright and active in your 70s and 80s, the future might not just be swallowing heavy calcium ors pills.
Or waiting until you fracture something to get a cast.
Exactly. The future is an active, personalized intervention. It could be a specialized daily bio-yogurt designed specifically for the unique microbial footprint of your own gut.
It fundamentally shifts the power back into our hands. We are no longer just passive victims of an aging skeleton. We can actively modulate our bone density through the microbiome.
Which leaves us with a pretty wild thought to mull over.
What's that?
If the bacteria in our gut have this much absolute systemic control over the strength and density of our bones, what happens if you suffer a severe acute injury?
Oh, wow. Yeah, it raises a profound question about the future of orthopedics.
Right.
Imagine a future where you suffer a severe compound fracture in a skiing accident.
Ouch.
You're rushed to the hospital, and the orthopedic surgeon doesn't just set the bone with pins and plates.
What do they do instead?
To accelerate the healing, they actually prescribe a highly customized bacterial stool transplant.
So they bypass the diet entirely. They just implant a perfectly engineered ecosystem of osteoprotective bacteria right into your colon.
Exactly. Flood your system with butyrate and supercharge the bone-building cells.
That completely redefines what bone medicine even means.
It truly does. The gut is the central command center for the entire body, and we are only just now learning how to sit at the control panel.
We hope you enjoyed today's podcast on the latest published science. See you next episode.
Thank you for listening to the RevGenetics podcast.
RevGenetics.com for the best longevity supplements on Earth.